excited to be right back on this show, Talk with Annie and Z. Yes, and as you know, we are your hosts on the gender-based violence. We'll be talking majorly on the gender-based violence, as we all know that gender-based violence is a very wide scope. I mean, you can't cover it. It has so many sections that you can talk about it with. And today on this episode, we have been having an amazing guest, someone who is, good at his field. He'll be taking up the legal aspect of the gender-based violence, of which I'm sure that you and I are going to benefit from what he's going to say. So stay tuned, as we're going to be taking you on different amazing questions and answers with our guests. It's still Talk with Annie and Z. Stay tuned.
Bye.
Yes, viewers, you're welcome back to Gender-Based Violence with Annie and Z. Yes, it's a talk with Annie and Z on gender-based violence. And just before we went for a short break, I told you that we'll be having a very special guest. So our guest is on set in person of Mr. Muta Aderoba, who is also a barrister by profession. You're welcome, Mr. Muta.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yes, Mr. Muta will actually be taking the law aspect of the gender-based violence. Just like I said before we went to lab, I told you that gender-based violence is a global issue, and aside that, it has different sides to how we can treat the gender-based violence. Over to you.
No, sir. What we're talking about, let's talk about the VAP Act. Can you enlighten us? What does VAP Act mean?
Thank you. Before we discuss what the VAP Act means, it is important to state that violence is as old as the human race itself. The act of violence did not start today, and different societies have evolved different ways of punishing violent acts and reducing violence in the society. As a nation, even right before independence, we've always had a means of dealing with violence in the society. But it appears that the means devised by the society to handle or combat violence have not been very effective. And that is why the lawmakers decided to come up with other means of tackling violence. So in 2015, the National Assembly of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, in response to the growing rate of violence in our society, especially the gender-based violence, decided to enact into law the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015, which was signed into law by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Specifically, the law was enacted to combat violence, especially the gender-based violence, due to the limitations associated with the existing penal legislations, like the Criminal Code and the Penal Code.
Alright, Mr. Aderoba, thank you very much for that briefing.
You're welcome.
In as much as this law has been in existence, just like you said, and we know that it has been in existence since May 2015, May 2015, do you think there's a problem with the law that has been enacted, passed onto the National Assembly? What do you think the problem is with the VAP Act?
Well, the VAP Act is a great innovation in our legislative intervention in the area of violence against persons, because it broadened the scope of violence. Before the enactment of the VAP Act, violence had always been thought to be associated with the exertion of physical force against the person of another, like when you assault somebody physically or you batter the person. But what the VAP Act has done is to expand the scope of violence to the extent that you need not to even touch somebody physically before you can be said to have visited violence on that person.
Okay, so this is to say that it is more than just physical violence.
It is more than physical violence. It could be emotional violence, it could be psychological violence, it could be even the act of deserting a spouse without making provision for the spouse is categorized as an act of violence. So it is actually a very great intervention from the legislature of this country, even though that is not to say that the law does not have its shortcomings. But I think for the sake of the innovations introduced into that law, our National Assembly deserves some commendation for thinking broadly on the aspect of violence.
All right. If I'm to thank you very much for that. If I'm to speak on what you said, you have actually commended the lawmakers for bringing up the VAP Act.
Yes.
Now, the real question is, do you think the law has been effective? I mean, do you have a different contrary opinion to whatever sections that is being in that law? Do you think the law has been effective for the past, last 6 years of inaction? There should be something you think that is not just
changed.
Yes, because I read the act and it was quite fascinating. But at some point, it was just funny. But I want Barrister Doroba to please enlighten us on what you think the problem is with the act.
Well, like I've always posited, the problem we have in this country is not actually lack of laws. It is not absence of laws. The problem we've had in this country over time has always had to do with implementation of the laws that we have.